Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Parashutz has the evening off. On the show tonight,
now we're all survivors of gun violence here in Highland Park.
In the wake of Monday's mass shooting, a look at gun laws and restrictions in the northern suburbs and what advocates want to see changed.
I hope people don't forget.
Illinois doesn't ban military-grade guns. We look into why not and whether that could change. Communities across the northern suburbs are mourning the victims of Monday's mass shooting in Highland Park. 2 more vigils are scheduled for tonight. As neighbors remember those lost and offer their support to survivors, advocates for stricter gun laws are also organizing to call for change. We begin our coverage with Nick Blumberg, who joins us now from the site of one of tonight's memorial gatherings in Highland Park. Nick.
That's right, Brandis. March for Our Lives is holding a candlelight vigil shortly here at Sunset Woods Park. As you mentioned, these gatherings have been happening throughout the week in the wake of the mass shooting that claimed 7 lives this past Monday. Now, just under a month ago, March for Our Lives Highland Park held an anti-gun violence rally at this same park following mass shootings in Uvalde, Buffalo, and Tulsa, among others. Attendees then marched through Highland Park, in fact, right through the site of this week's mass shooting. Organizer Rachel Jacoby says about 400 people came out to show their support for tougher restrictions on guns.
Illinois and Highland Park specifically have really strict gun laws that keep us safe. Our neighbors don't. So here in Illinois, because Wisconsin and Indiana and Ohio and Iowa have much more lax gun laws, that makes all of us in danger because someone can just easily cross the border and get access to a gun that they wouldn't be able to have access to here in Illinois.
Now, Jacoby wants to see action at the federal level with things like universal background checks for gun buyers. Some local municipalities have tough gun restrictions. Highland Park and neighboring Deerfield have assault weapons bans. So too do Cook County and Chicago to the south. But putting local gun regulations in place isn't a sure thing. In 2013, the courts forced Illinois to pass a law legalizing concealed carry. That law also restricted what home rule municipalities could do in terms of gun restrictions if they didn't already have any on the books. Now, attorney Richard Cates, a former Village of Winnetka trustee, told me that that village scrambled to make sure they got something on the books before a narrow window closed.
We concentrated on the safe storage, so you had to lock. You could have guns, but you had to keep them under lock and key and have heavy security so that a child, for instance, couldn't get into it. The use of a weapon, the transportation of a weapon, and have some strict restrictions on assault weapons. The involvement.
Now, Kate says it's unfortunate that some municipalities can't enact local gun restrictions, especially since they have limited sway over what the General Assembly does.
Anything can happen with state legislation. So it's important that locally we maintain our rights to legislate in this area.
Now, despite various state and local restrictions, investigators say the accused Highland Park gunman was able to legally buy at least one of the weapons recovered after the shooting. He reportedly bought it online and picked it up at Red Dot Arms in far north suburban Lake Villa, according to the Daily Beast and CBS 2. Employees at the store refused to comment to us and would not confirm or deny whether the alleged shooter picked up a weapon there. I also spoke with North Suburban firearms expert and concealed carry trainer Marcus Melnick. He says he doesn't support things like assault weapons bans, calling them ineffective.
Nobody in the firearms culture wants someone who should not have access to firearms to get access to firearms. The FOID card does that. There are firearm instructors and professionals out there who say, well, that's still an infringement. At the same time, it is a background check on everyone, and if the system works correctly and the reporting is done correctly, that is supposed to limit gun ownership to people that shouldn't own firearms.
Now, as for whether the system worked correctly in the case of the accused Highland Park shooter, who police had previously flagged as potentially dangerous, Melnick says further investigation will offer insight into whether things went as they should. And he says despite calls for tighter gun laws, carrying a firearm can have effects beyond just self-defense.
It changes the way someone carries themselves. It also makes them more hyper aware maybe is too strong, but more aware of their surroundings so that they can avoid trouble.
But that outlook isn't likely to sway organizer Rachel Jacoby and other like-minded folks. March for Our Lives Highland Park is holding another rally this coming Saturday. Jacoby says it's important not to become desensitized to mass shootings.
We need to remember that this isn't normal. Living with this kind of gun violence and under this type of threat from gun violence isn't normal, and we all have the power to do something about it and to make our communities safe from gun violence.
Now, coming up, we'll talk with the Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart. We'll also have more from this evening's vigil. Organizers say some 200 people are expected, with any funds raised going toward the Highland Park Community Fund to benefit victims, survivors, and first responders. But for now, Brandis, back to you.
Nick, thanks. We'll see you a bit later on. Now, we've just focused on gun control at the local and federal levels, but Monday's shooting has also sparked talk about what Illinois can and should be doing, especially given that the state issued a firearms owner's identification, or FOID, card to the alleged shooter even after the then teenager showed clear signs of trouble. Amanda Venicky joins us now with more. And Amanda, what have the state police said about that?
Well, Brandis, the Illinois State Police have defended their issuing a FOID to Robert Cremo III, despite Highland Park Police filing a clear and present danger report about a 2019 incident in which Cremo reportedly threatened to kill members of his family. State Police boiled this down to matters of timing and also threshold. There's no felony on record, and Cremo hasn't been admitted to a mental health facility. Plus, his dad had signed off on that FOID application. But Republican nominee for governor Darren Bailey says the buck stops at the top and blames Governor J.B. Pritzker and the state police under his jurisdiction.
The Firearms Restraining Act would have prevented the tragedy on the 4th, but you buried it. You left it moldering in some bureaucratic basement somewhere. Your watch, Governor. It's not enough to pass laws. You have to do the hard work to make sure that the laws do what they were intended to do.
He's referring to what is often called the state's red flag law, in which family members can petition the courts to temporarily remove guns from someone who is dangerous. Now, law enforcement also has that ability. We have previously reported on how relatively rarely that red flag has been used, though a new law signed by Pritzker does expand the act and puts money towards spreading public awareness about it. Bailey voted against that law. Now, Pritzker's campaign calls his opponent's position on guns extreme and points out that this spring, the Bailey campaign had raised money using gun raffles, including a gun similar to the one used in the Highland Park massacre. Asked about the raffles, Bailey says he was in compliance with the law and that most people buy guns for self-defense. Referencing that Highland Park shooting and spates of violence in the city, Bailey called for a special session of the legislature to address what he calls mayhem in our streets.
We must do whatever it takes to address the breakdown in mental health, particularly among isolated young men, which was made immeasurably worse during Pritzker's lockdowns.
Bailey says Illinois doesn't need more gun restrictions. It needs to enforce its current laws. But after the July 4th weekend violence, various organizations are calling for just that, like the Illinois Latino Agenda Coalition, which wants an assault weapons registry, also mandatory fingerprinting for all FOID applications. Now, a measure to do that also stalled in Springfield last year. Top on the coalition's list is also the #1 ask of the Gun Violence Prevention PAC.
We need to regulate weapons of war. You know, the shooter Monday had an M&P 15, a Smith & Wesson assault rifle, M&P, military and police. And so that is not, I don't understand why a civilian, why anybody needs a weapon with that kind of power.
State Representative Maura Hirschauer is sponsor of a measure that would ban military-grade weapons, but it didn't advance, despite Democrats holding super majorities in both chambers of the legislature and controlling the governor's office.
This session was fast and furious in Springfield. It was a shortened session. The bill did go to the Judiciary Criminal Committee and into a subcommittee. and there simply wasn't time to tackle it.
Now, subcommittees are where bills are put when, try as the sponsor might, they are there to die, or at the very least to be put on the back burner. Hirschauer says that she thinks of preventing gun violence as something like a jigsaw puzzle, and lawmakers, she says, have for the past couple of years fixed on pieces like anti-violence programs and funding for them, also aspects of criminal justice.
This happens to be, the assault weapons ban happens to be, I think, a pretty good size puzzle piece that needed a jump start. And I hate that we live like this, but tragedies capture the attention of the public.
And it has. A Highland Park father who ran with his children during Monday's parade away from that gunfire started a change.org petition just this morning calling for Illinois to pass an assault weapons ban. Hirschauer's bill, exactly. It has, at last check, really just before the show started, amassed more than 21,000 signatures. GPAC says there have been similar efforts for years.
Until this point, we have felt like they're not politically viable. So that's why they haven't passed. If they were politically viable, they'd go up on the board and they'd be, signed, so I just think that the time has to be right. And I hope the time is right now.
Yeah. Did this change things? Do you think it is?
I do. But I hope people don't forget.
She says advocates will be pushing to make sure legislators don't forget, that they don't drop this. GPAC and other advocates have demands.
Legislators are going to take action as soon as they can. They have an upcoming special session. It's dedicated to choice. I think that's great, but they can do two things at once. And I hope they take this up.
Now, there has been no word on any special session. As you heard Sansa's reference, the governor, after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe, did say that this month he would call one to take up abortion-related legislation, but that special session has been delayed, and there is no word on when it will happen. With that, Brandis, back to you.
And now back to Nick Blumberg, who's been reporting today from Highland Park. Nick.
That's right, Brandis. We are joined now by Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart. I know this is a difficult week for you, so thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, of course.
So at the bond hearing yesterday, the accused gunman was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. There was also some discussion that there may be additional charges forthcoming. What can you tell us about any possible additional avenues for prosecution?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I continue to express my condolences to the families who lost their loved ones. We have dozens of individuals with gunshot wounds, and every one of those individuals has a right to justice. So we will have charges centering around each one of those people that was hurt by gunfire. This has been devastating to Highland Park. Highland Park will not be the same, Lake County will not be the same, and every one of those victims of a gunshot deserves justice. So there'll be more charges centering around each of those victims.
Yeah, I mean, you're a local resident, you know this community. How challenging has it been to prosecute this issue?
Yeah. Well, we've had amazing law enforcement. We had amazing first responders who ran towards the gunfire. Law enforcement has been unbelievable. FBI, ATF, the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force, Illinois State Police, the sheriff, City of Highland Park. The police not only protected people, but they made this case. They captured this gunman in a matter of hours. Their work to gather that evidence is going to make our job straightforward. And as hurt as the state's attorney's office is, as members of this community, we are focused. We are focused on justice. We are focused on serving each and every direct victim, as well as this community. We have victim witness counselors. We've had them here in the community every day since this happened. They're here tonight. We're at multiple events tonight, and we're here to support the community.
Yeah, how important is that to have that sort of, not just the prosecution, not just making sure that the alleged gunman, has his day in court, but making sure that the people who have been impacted directly or indirectly are cared for? Absolutely.
I mean, first of all, you have to have transparency. You have to tell people what's going on. You have to have people on the ground. We've had multiple counselors here every day. We've had our comfort dog here. We have everything in English and Spanish. We have a lot of Spanish speaker counselors, and we are here to listen to people, to be there for people, to tell them that this is going to be a process and that nobody should be alone during this time.
You've also spoken out since this shooting, calling for a nationwide assault weapons ban. What are your hopes that might accomplish?
We have got to stop these. There can't be another town going through this in a few days or in a few weeks. We must stop this. I don't want any other town to go through this. There can't be any more victims. Whatever it takes to do that. We have to have an assault weapon ban. We had it from 1994 to 2004. It had bipartisan support, and it had law enforcement support. We can do it in Illinois. We can do it in the United States, and we have to increase awareness about red flag laws here in Illinois.
Are you hopeful that there is the political will that these sorts of tragedies might result in further action?
I hope so. I've spoken to several state legislators. I've spoken to Congressman Schneider. My hope is that this can keep moving, but we have to find multiple ways to stop this. We have to have multiple ways to protect people. The people who lost their lives, their freedom matters. They've lost the freedom to live the rest of their life, but to live, to love, to learn, to do the things that we sometimes take for granted. They have lost those freedoms, and we have to figure out a way to get this balance right.
What's your message to folks who say, well, these sorts of bans might not be effective? You know, for example, Highland Park did have an assault weapons ban. Unfortunately, this tragedy still occurred. What would you say to people who might push back on that?
Yeah, first of all, Highland Park has a ban, and this gunman didn't buy the weapon in Highland Park. He bought it in Lake County. I wish Lake County had that ban. That's not the fault of Lake County. The law says that individual counties cannot legislate on this. Cook County does have an assault weapon ban. As concerned as we are about the crime in Chicago, imagine if people were buying assault weapons in Cook County. It's hard to prove a negative sometimes, right? And so places that do have these bans are potentially safer than they would be. And of course, we should make it as difficult as we can to get the weapons. The fact that you can't be perfect and seal off a place doesn't mean that we shouldn't have common sense approaches.
All right, Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhardt, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more with one of the organizers of this evening's Candlelight Vigil. For now, Brandis, back to you in the studio.
Now back out to Highland Park, where we check in with Nick Blumberg, who spent the day there. Nick.
Brandis, I'm here with LIZA TACK, who's one of the organizers of this evening's vigil here at Sunset Woods Park. Thank you for being with us. I know it's a tough week and you've got a lot going on this evening, so thank you.
Thank you.
Why was it important to you to help organize this event?
So I've been involved with March for Our Lives since about my junior year of high school, so when I was 16. So it's been about 3 years, and I've been organizing and marching and doing this thing for as long as I can remember, but never has it hit my hometown quite like it just did. And just, it's really impacted, I feel like, all of us. So I really wanted to make sure that everyone in the community has a safe space to gather and mourn during this difficult period.
Yeah, how does it feel, even in the midst of such a horrible incident, to be able to see so many of your friends and neighbors and community members come together?
Honestly, it makes me feel really great. It's really, a really emotional time, and seeing how our community is so strong and resilient and able to come together in a time like this and is here to support each other just really warms my heart, and it makes me proud to be a part of Highland Park.
What is your message to folks about the kinds of actions you would like to see in response to not just this shooting, but the many tragic mass shootings that we've seen in recent years?
I think the biggest thing that we all want to see is more gun reform, more red flag laws, and a ban on assault rifles. I know there was recently a new piece of legislation that was brought up called Aiden's Law that would put a ban on assault rifles, and I think that that's the kind of reform that we need right now. We know that these mass shootings, what is doing it are the guns. So what we need is to be able to control the amount that are out there and make sure that they don't get in the wrong hands.
And, you know, your message, in addition to the different reforms that you'd like to see in place, what sort of supports do folks need after something like this touches their community?
I think what we need to remember as well, like I said, like all those different reforms are necessary and important. Mental health is still very important and needs to be taken care of during this time. I know in our community they started some different support services at the local high schools and elementary schools, and I think it's really important to take advantage of that. So just making sure that you are taking care of yourself and your mental well-being is really important.
All right, LIZA TACK with March for Our Lives, thank you so much for speaking tonight. That'll do it for us from Highland Park, Brandis. Obviously an emotional day, a big outpouring here. This park has really filled up. For now, back to you in the studio.
Yeah, Nick, I was just noticing that it's filled up quite a bit in this hour that we've been talking. Thanks so much. And you can find much more on the Highland Park shooting, its aftermath, and a list of resources on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news.